The bedroom door crashed against the wall at 2 minutes past midnight. Grace Miller woke on the carpet beside the bed, with one hand wrapped around the wrist of the most feared man in Boston. Adrian Romano lay above her in the enormous black bed, his skin pale beneath the moonlight, his dark hair damp with sweat. The sheets were tangled around his legs. One of his hands still gripped the handle of a knife that had been hidden beneath his pillow. The blade hovered only inches from the place where Grace had been sleeping. She had not moved when he reached for it. She knew what happened when Adrian woke too quickly. A dozen people stood in the open doorway. Household staff, security guards, 2 wealthy women who had arrived early for the engagement dinner, the estate manager, a violinist carrying her instrument case. At the center of them stood Vivienne Bellucci. She wore a white silk gown, even though the engagement dinner was not until the following evening. Diamonds circled her throat. Her black hair rested in polished waves against her shoulders, and her expression changed from surprise to cold satisfaction as she looked from Grace to the half-dressed man in the bed. Grace slowly released the wrist of Adrian. "Do not wake him suddenly," she whispered. Vivienne entered the room. She glanced at the blanket folded beneath Grace and the untouched chair near the window. Then she smiled. "So this is why you insisted on cleaning this floor yourself." Grace stood carefully. Her body was stiff after hours on the carpet. Her blue housekeeping dress had wrinkled around her full hips, and several strands of auburn hair had fallen from the knot at the back of her head. Mr. Romano was having an episode. Vivienne looked toward the bed. Adrian did not appear powerful at that moment. His eyes moved beneath his closed lids. His breathing came in sharp, painful bursts. A scar crossed his ribs where a bullet had entered his body 3 months earlier. Vivienne turned back to Grace. "You were found sleeping in the bedroom of the man I am going to marry." "I was beside the bed." "You were in his room?" "He called for help. There are doctors for that." "He refused the medication." Vivienne moved close enough for Grace to smell the expensive violet perfume on her skin. "You expected everyone to believe that Adrian Romano needed comfort from a housekeeper." Grace lowered her voice. "I do not care what anyone believes." He was tearing open his wound. Vivienne slapped her. The sound struck the room harder than the door had. Grace stumbled 1 step but remained standing. Heat spread across her cheek. Nobody in the doorway moved. Even the guards looked toward the floor. Vivienne spoke loudly enough for every witness to hear. "Grace Miller is dismissed from this estate. She is not to receive a recommendation. She is not to enter any property owned by the Romano family again. You do not have the authority to dismiss me. I will have that authority tomorrow. Not until you marry him." The satisfaction vanished from Vivienne. She grabbed the sleeve of Grace and pulled her toward the door. Grace resisted only long enough to look back at Adrian. His breathing had changed. His fingers moved against the sheets as though searching for something. "Grace," he whispered. The name was barely audible. Vivienne heard it. Her grip tightened. "Get her out." 2 security guards stepped forward. Grace knew both men. Neither met her eyes as they escorted her through the corridor. The household followed at a distance. Drawn by humiliation, the way strangers gathered around a broken window, Vivienne did not allow Grace to use the main staircase. She made the guards take her through the service hall, past the kitchen staff, and through the narrow door beside the delivery entrance. Snow had begun falling over the Romano estate. Grace had no coat. Her handbag was still inside her small room above the eastern kitchen, along with her wallet, her apartment keys, and the photograph of her mother that she carried everywhere. Vivienne appeared beneath the doorway. "Send her belongings tomorrow." Grace stood in the snow. Behind Vivienne, the estate glowed with warm golden light. Crystal chandeliers were being polished for the engagement dinner. Florists covered the marble ballroom with white roses. Musicians rehearsed behind closed doors. Grace touched her burning cheek. "He will wake afraid." Vivienne gave her a calm smile. Then he will finally remember who should be beside him. The door closed. Grace walked away from the estate without looking back. She did not see Adrian wake 20 minutes later. He woke fighting. The knife cut through the pillow before his eyes opened. His body twisted, and the healing wound beneath his ribs tore beneath the bandage. He rolled from the bed and struck the floor with enough force to overturn the table beside him. For several seconds, he did not know where he was. He smelled gasoline. He heard gunfire beneath the ground. He saw the black car burning around him and the blood of his driver spreading across the windshield. Then the bedroom returned. The flames became moonlight. The gunfire became his own heartbeat. The body beside him was gone. Adrian looked toward the carpet. The blanket remained. Grace did not. He crossed the room barefoot and opened the door. 3 guards stood outside. "Where is she?" Nobody answered. Adrian looked at the oldest guard. "Where is Grace, Mr. Romano?" "Miss Bellucci found her inside your room." "I know where she was. I asked where she is now." The guard swallowed. Miss Bellucci dismissed her. The corridor became silent. Adrian did not raise his voice. "Who allowed Grace to leave this house?" The guard looked toward the floor. Adrian walked past him. Blood had begun seeping through the bandage beneath his shirt, but he did not stop to cover it. He descended the main staircase as servants moved away from his path. The final rehearsal for the engagement dinner was taking place in the ballroom. Vivienne sat at the long table with her father, Enzo Bellucci, and 14 members of both families. Crystal glasses glittered beneath hundreds of candles. A string quartet played softly near the windows. Adrian entered without shoes, without a jacket, and with blood spreading over his white shirt. The music stopped. Vivienne rose. "Adrian, you should be resting." "Where is Grace?" Enzo Bellucci observed him with cold interest. Vivienne smiled gently, as though speaking to a sick child. "There was an inappropriate incident. I handled it." Adrian looked at the 2 guards beside the ballroom doors. "Lock the estate." The guards immediately closed the doors. Vivienne stared at him. Adrian turned toward the other exits. "Nobody leaves this room." Several guests exchanged uneasy looks. Enzo leaned back in his chair. "Is this necessary?" Adrian placed both hands on the table and looked at every person seated there. "Grace Miller was not sleeping in my room because she wanted me." His voice remained quiet, but nobody moved. "She was sleeping on the floor because I cannot survive the night without waking inside the car where my men died." Vivienne lost all color in her face. Adrian continued, "The nightmares belong to me. The fear belongs to me. The shame belongs to anyone who watched an innocent woman being thrown into the snow because she protected a man none of you were brave enough to approach." He turned toward his head of security. "Bring Grace back." Vivienne stepped around the table. "You cannot mean to delay this dinner because of a servant." Adrian looked at her. "You will remain seated until she returns. I am your fiancé." Then you should have known who was having the nightmares. 3 months earlier, Grace had entered the Romano estate through the same service door that Vivienne later used to throw her out. Grace had been hired for a temporary position after half of the household staff resigned. The newspapers claimed that Adrian Romano had survived a business dispute. The staff knew the truth. A convoy carrying Adrian had been attacked beneath a luxury hotel. 4 men had died. Adrian had been shot twice and trapped inside a burning vehicle until his brother pulled him free. Nobody at the estate discussed the attack openly. Grace learned about it through the silence. Guards checked every cupboard before meals. Curtains remained closed after sunset. A loaded weapon appeared beneath every table where Adrian sat. Doctors arrived at unpredictable hours and left without speaking. Grace intended to work for 2 months, save enough money to repair the heating system in her apartment, and leave before the violence of the Romano world touched her. She first saw Adrian on her 3rd morning. He stood alone in the library, wearing black trousers and an unbuttoned shirt. Bandages covered his ribs. A glass of whiskey rested untouched beside him. Grace had been told that nobody entered the library before noon. She started to back away. Adrian raised a gun toward her. Most people would have screamed. Grace looked at his hand. The weapon was steady. His breathing was not. "You are bleeding," she said. "Who are you, Grace Miller?" "Housekeeping." "Who sent you, Mrs.?" "Cole asked me to clean the fireplace." "Nobody enters this room." "The fireplace has not been cleaned in weeks." His eyes narrowed. "Are you correcting me? I am explaining the dust." The gun remained pointed at her. Grace could see the exhaustion beneath his suspicion. His pupils were too wide. Sweat shone at his temples even though the room was cold. He was not looking at her. He was looking through her. Grace slowly set down the basket in her hand. "Mr. Romano, I am going to move closer. Do not. Your bandage is red. Leave. You are going to fall." Adrian took one step toward her. His knees gave way. Grace reached him before his head struck the stone fireplace. The weight of his body nearly took both of them to the floor. She wrapped one arm around his waist and pressed the other against the wound. He pushed the gun beneath her chin. "Do not touch me. Then stand by yourself." His jaw tightened. Grace held him until he found his balance. She felt every muscle in his body resisting the need to depend on her. Footsteps sounded in the corridor. Adrian lowered the weapon. Grace released him immediately. "You should call the doctor." "No. You need stitches." "No doctors." That is not a reasonable answer. Nothing inside this house requires your opinion. Grace picked up her basket. "Then clean your own blood from the carpet." She walked out before he could respond. That night, she heard something break on the third floor. The other servants remained in their rooms. Grace stood outside the bedroom of Adrian and listened. A lamp shattered. A man shouted for someone to get out. Then came a sound Grace recognized. Not rage. Panic. Her father had made the same sound during the final months of his life after a factory accident left him afraid of enclosed rooms. Grace had spent countless nights sitting outside his bedroom because he could not bear anyone watching him struggle. She opened the door. Adrian stood beside the bed with a gun pointed toward the window. Blood covered his hand. The stitches beneath his bandage had opened again. There was nobody else in the room. Grace stopped inside the doorway. "Mr. Romano," he turned the gun toward her. "Get down. There is nobody behind me. They are inside the garage. You are in your bedroom. The car is burning. There is no fire." He moved toward her with the weapon raised. Grace wanted to run. Instead, she remembered her father gripping the bathroom sink while begging the walls to move farther apart. She spoke carefully. "Look at my dress." Adrian stared at her. "What color is it?" He said nothing. "Blue." "What?" "My dress is blue. The carpet is gray. The curtains are black. The lamp is broken. You are at home." His arm began to tremble. Grace lowered herself to the floor. "You do not have to trust me. You only have to look at me." He stared into her eyes. "Breathe when I breathe." The gun slowly lowered. Grace inhaled. Adrian followed. She counted each breath. She named every object in the room. She kept her voice even when he sank against the bed and gripped his wound. He remained silent for several minutes. Then he looked at her as though seeing her for the first time. "Why did you come inside? Nobody else did." "That is not an answer. It is the only one I have." He looked toward the open door. "Everyone in this house fears me. They have reasons." "You do not. I did not say that." Something changed in his expression. Grace could not name it then. It was not warmth. It was attention. The following evening, the estate manager informed Grace that her temporary position had become permanent. Grace refused. The estate manager looked horrified. Nobody refused. Adrian Romano. Grace was standing in the laundry room, folding sheets. Then he can learn something new. Adrian appeared in the doorway. The other servants vanished within seconds. He wore a black shirt that concealed the fresh bandages. His face had returned to the controlled mask seen in newspapers and security photographs. Why are you refusing the position? Because your employees are afraid to enter your bedroom when you are injured. They are paid to follow orders. Fear changes what people hear. And you hear differently. I heard a man who needed help. His expression hardened. You will not discuss what happened. I have no reason to discuss it. I need certainty. Grace placed the folded sheet on the cart. Then you should find someone you trust. I do not trust anyone. That sounds expensive. His eyes moved briefly over her face. You will remain on this floor at night. No. It was the first time anyone had answered Adrian so quickly. He stepped closer. You misunderstand the nature of this conversation. I clean rooms. I do not obey orders unrelated to my work. I will triple your salary. No. 5 times. No. He studied her as if she were a locked door. Grace pushed the cart toward him. Please move. Adrian did not. Why did you stay last night? Because you were afraid. I was not afraid. Then you do not need me. She waited. Adrian moved away from the cart. Grace walked past him. That night, a chair appeared beside the bedroom door with a sealed envelope on it. The envelope contained enough money to repair the heating system in her apartment. Grace returned it unopened. At 2 in the morning, Adrian had another nightmare. Grace found him sitting on the bathroom floor with both hands over his ears. She remained beside the doorway until he lifted his head. You came back, he said. I am still employed here. He looked at the folded blanket in her arms. Grace placed it on the carpet beside the bed. I will stay until you fall asleep. He watched as she sat down. You will take the money. No. You will accept the increased salary. Only if the other night employees receive a raise. His mouth almost moved into a smile. Almost. You negotiate while I am bleeding. You seem to listen better. That was how it began. Grace never slept in the bed. She sat in the chair or rested on the carpet with a blanket beneath her. Some nights Adrian woke shouting. Other nights he opened his eyes in silence and looked toward her until his breathing slowed. He refused to discuss the dreams during daylight. He also refused to admit that he waited for her. Yet whenever Grace finished her work late, a guard appeared to escort her upstairs. When she had a day away from the estate, Adrian remained awake until dawn. He began asking questions. Why had she become a housekeeper? Because hotels and wealthy families always needed clean rooms. Why did she live alone? Because peace was easier to find alone. Why did she never ask about his business? Because the answers would not improve her life. Why did she not fear him as much as everyone else? Grace looked at the gun on his nightstand. I fear what you can do. I do not fear every part of you. Adrian remained silent for so long that she thought he had fallen asleep. Then he said, You should. Vivienne Bellucci arrived at the estate 2 weeks later. The engagement had been arranged before the assassination attempt. The Bellucci family controlled shipping routes that Adrian needed. The Romano family controlled ports that Enzo Bellucci wanted. Vivienne was beautiful, educated, and perfectly suited to stand beside a man like Adrian in photographs. She was also the first person who noticed that Adrian looked toward the door whenever Grace left a room. Vivienne began finding reasons to summon Grace. A glass was not polished enough. A dress had been hung in the wrong direction. Flowers had been placed too close to a window. Grace completed every task without complaint. The humiliation became sharper when patience failed to produce a reaction. At a luncheon attended by wealthy guests, Vivienne spilled red wine across the white carpet and ordered Grace to clean it while everyone watched. Grace knelt without looking embarrassed. Adrian entered as Vivienne placed one jeweled shoe beside the stain. He stopped. Who spilled the wine? Vivienne smiled. It was an accident. Adrian looked at Grace. Stand up. Grace rose. Adrian turned toward the estate manager. Replace the carpet. Vivienne laughed softly. That seems unnecessary. Adrian looked at the shoe, resting near the stain. Remove it. The smile of Vivienne disappeared. Grace left before anyone saw the relief on her face. That evening, Adrian found her on the back staircase. You should have told me. About the wine. About her. Grace continued folding a clean towel. You are going to marry her. That does not give her permission to mistreat you. You are giving her permission to command the entire house. Adrian moved one step closer. Not you. Grace looked at him. The silence between them changed. His gaze dropped toward her mouth, then returned to her eyes. His hand lifted as though he intended to touch the red mark left by a cleaning chemical on her wrist. He stopped before making contact. Grace felt the absence of that touch more sharply than she would have felt his fingers. You should go to bed, she whispered. Will you be there? The question sounded too intimate. Grace turned away. If you need me, I always need you at night. The honesty surprised both of them. Adrian hardened immediately. For the episodes. Of course. Grace carried the towels upstairs without looking back. After Vivienne ordered Grace into the snow, Adrian sent 6 cars to find her. The first vehicle located her nearly 2 miles from the estate. Grace refused to enter it. The guard called Adrian. He stood in the ballroom before the silent engagement guests, listening to the report. Give me the location. Vivienne rose again. You cannot go after her like this. Adrian looked at the white roses surrounding the table. Watch me. He left the ballroom and drove alone. Grace was walking beside a dark road when the headlights appeared behind her. The car stopped several feet away. Adrian stepped into the snow. He had put on shoes, but he still wore the blood-stained shirt. He carried a black wool coat over one arm. Grace stopped. Neither spoke for several seconds. Snow gathered in the dark hair of Adrian. He approached her slowly and placed the coat around her shoulders. Grace almost pushed it away. Then she felt the warmth still trapped inside it. Your wound is open, she said. You were thrown out without a coat. You should be with your guests. They are not going anywhere. She looked at him. What did you do? Lock the doors. You cannot imprison people during your engagement dinner. They are free to leave when you return. Grace stared at him. That is not an invitation. That is a threat. It is both. I am not going back to be displayed as the grateful housekeeper you rescued. You were publicly humiliated in my home. By the woman you intend to marry. His jaw tightened. Grace stepped closer. You cannot protect me from her at night and give her power over me during the day. Adrian looked toward the falling snow. For the first time since Grace had met him, he seemed uncertain. She waited. He turned back to her. I will correct it in front of every person who witnessed it. And tomorrow she will understand that you answer to nobody in that house except me. Grace shook her head. That is not better. Something dangerous moved behind his eyes. Everyone answers to someone. Then this is the reason you wake alone. Adrian went completely still. Grace expected anger. Instead, pain crossed his face before he could hide it. She took one step back. I am sorry. Do not apologize for telling the truth. His voice had become quiet. He opened the passenger door. Come back. Not because I ordered it. Come back because I am asking. Grace looked at the road behind her. Then she looked at the man who could command hundreds of armed men but could not close his eyes without reliving the moment he almost died. She entered the car. When they returned, every guest remained seated exactly where Adrian had left them. The ballroom doors opened. Grace entered wearing the black coat of Adrian over her blue housekeeping dress. Snow melted in her auburn hair. Her cheeks still carried the mark from the hand of Vivienne. Adrian walked beside her. The guests stared. He did not take his place at the head of the table. He moved a chair away from the wall and placed it beside his own. Sit. Grace remained standing. Adrian understood. He faced the room. Grace Miller was accused of entering my bedroom to seduce me. Vivienne looked toward her father. Adrian continued. The truth is that I asked Grace to remain near me because I have suffered violent nightmares since the attack. She has slept on the carpet beside my bed because I become dangerous when I wake. She has refused every payment I offered beyond her salary. She has never entered my bed. She has never taken advantage of me. His gaze moved to Vivienne. You struck her. Vivienne lifted her chin. She was found in a compromising position. The only compromise was mine. Adrian stepped closer to her. Apologize. Enzo Bellucci rose. My daughter will not be humiliated in front of both families. Adrian looked at him. Then teach her not to humiliate women who cannot retaliate. Enzo placed one hand on the table. This engagement protects peace between our families. Peace built on cruelty is only a pause before war. Vivienne looked at Grace. The apology came through clenched teeth. I misunderstood the situation. Grace spoke calmly. You understood enough to wait until he was unconscious. A few guests lowered their eyes to hide their reactions. Vivienne looked toward Adrian. Are you going to allow a servant to speak to me that way? Adrian pulled out the chair beside his own. Grace is not serving anyone tonight. Grace sat. Adrian remained standing. The dinner is over. The room erupted in whispers. Enzo stared at him. What about the announcement? There will be no announcement tonight. Adrian looked toward Vivienne. You will move to the Western guest house until I decide whether this engagement continues. Vivienne walked past Grace. As she did, she whispered, he will destroy you when he no longer needs you. Grace watched Adrian dismiss the guests one by one. She feared Vivienne might be right. Later that night, Grace packed her belongings. Adrian found her in the small room above the kitchen. You are leaving. It was not a question. Grace closed her suitcase. I cannot stay here after tonight. You were publicly cleared. That does not change what this house has become. His gaze moved toward the suitcase. You said I wake alone because everyone answers to someone. I was angry. You were right. Grace stopped folding her dress. Adrian remained near the doorway, as though entering the room would require permission. What happens when you sleep tonight? She asked. I do not know. You know. His expression did not change. But his fingers closed into a fist. Grace saw the truth. For all his power, Adrian was terrified of the moment his eyes closed. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed. Tell me what you remember. Nothing useful. Tell me anyway. Adrian looked down the dark corridor before entering. He closed the door, but did not approach her. The attack happened beneath the Belmont Hotel. My driver was killed before the car stopped. 2 vehicles blocked the exit. The first bullet entered here. He touched his ribs. The second struck my shoulder. Someone threw an incendiary device beneath the car. Grace listened. My brother pulled me out. I remember the fire. I remember a man wearing a silver ring. I remember violet perfume. Grace felt a chill. Vivienne wears violet perfume. So do thousands of women. Did you tell her what you remembered? No. Did you tell the doctor? Yes. Which doctor? Dr. Martin Vale. The physician who visited every evening. Grace remembered the leather case he carried and the medication Adrian often refused. What happens when you take the medicine? I sleep longer. Do the nightmares become worse? Adrian watched her. Why are you asking? Because you only tore your wound open after the doctor visited. His expression became guarded. You think my physician is harming me? I think you should consider it. Vale treated my father. He has worked for my family for 20 years. That does not answer the question. Adrian moved close enough that she could see anger gathering behind his calm face. Do not create enemies inside my house because you dislike my fiancée. I do not dislike Vivienne because she is your fiancée. I dislike her because she hit me. His anger faltered. Grace stood. You asked me to tell you what I see. I see a man who trusts history more than evidence. You are crossing a line. Then find someone else to sit beside your bed. She lifted her suitcase. Adrian took it from her. Grace reached for the handle. Give it back. Stay until morning. No. One night? You cannot order me. I am not ordering you. The admission cost him. Grace released the suitcase. One night, he carried her belongings upstairs. Adrian refused the medication that evening. The nightmare came shortly before dawn, but it was different. He did not wake with a weapon. He opened his eyes and gripped the sheets. Grace sat beside the bed, breathing with him until the room returned. His hand found hers. Neither moved. The first light of morning spread across his face. Grace felt his thumb brush over her fingers. I heard a woman during the attack. He whispered. What did she say? Hold him until the violet seal is broken. Grace remembered the engagement invitations stacked inside the ballroom office. Each envelope had been closed with violet wax, carrying the Bellucci crest. Adrian saw recognition in her face. What is it? Before Grace could answer. The bedroom window shattered. Adrian pulled her to the floor. A bullet struck the wall above the bed. He covered her body with his. As more glass exploded across the carpet, guards shouted in the corridor. Adrian reached beneath the bed and pulled out a gun. Stay down. He moved toward the broken window. Grace grabbed his ankle. Do not stand in front of it. Another bullet tore through the curtain. Adrian fired toward the tree line, then turned and lifted Grace into his arms. I can walk. You are barefoot. He carried her through the corridor while alarms screamed across the estate. The entire property transformed within seconds. Steel doors closed over the windows. Guards moved through the halls with weapons drawn. Black vehicles surrounded the entrances. Adrian carried Grace into an underground security room and set her on a table. Blood ran from a cut above her eyebrow. He touched it with surprising gentleness. You are hurt. It is glass. He examined her face. Grace looked at the blood spreading through his bandage again. So are you. A guard entered. The shooter escaped through the northern woods. We found a rifle and a Bellucci security badge. Adrian looked at him. That is too obvious. Grace understood. Someone wanted Adrian to blame the Bellucci family before he discovered the truth himself. Dr. Vale arrived carrying his leather case. Adrian needs the medication now. Grace moved between them. No. The doctor looked offended. Excuse me, test it first. Vale turned toward Adrian. She has no medical training. Adrian studied the leather case. Open it. The doctor hesitated. It is sterile equipment. Open it. Vale slowly unfastened the case. Grace watched his hands. They were shaking. Adrian saw it too. The doctor reached inside. Instead of removing medicine, he pulled a small pistol from beneath the vials. Adrian fired first. The weapon fell from the hand of Vale. A bullet struck the table. Grace flinched as guards dragged the doctor to the floor. Adrian stood over him. What is in the medication? Vale said nothing. Adrian crouched. You have treated my family for 20 years. Give me one reason not to end your life before the next breath. Vale looked toward Grace. She ruined everything. Adrian became very still. Who paid you? The doctor smiled through his fear. Ask the woman who sleeps better when you do not. The lights went out. An explosion shook the security room. Smoke filled the corridor. Emergency lights flashed red. Guards shouted that the northern gate had been breached. Adrian seized the hand of Grace. We are leaving. What about the doctor? He is the distraction. They escaped through a tunnel beneath the estate. Adrian kept Grace behind him as 4 guards led them toward a hidden garage. The floor trembled from gunfire above. Grace stopped halfway down the tunnel. My suitcase. Adrian stared at her. You want to return for clothing? My apartment keys are inside it. You will not be returning to your apartment. That is not your decision. Someone just fired through my bedroom window while you were holding my hand. Grace looked at him. Then stop telling yourself they only want you. He had no answer. They entered an armored vehicle. The convoy left through a concealed road as smoke rose above the Romano estate. Adrian took Grace to a safe house overlooking Boston Harbor. It appeared from the outside to be an abandoned warehouse. Inside were polished concrete floors, reinforced windows, several bedrooms, and a private dock where a black boat waited beneath the fog. Grace stood in the main room while guards secured the building. Adrian placed a clean shirt on a table. You can take the bedroom upstairs. Where will you sleep? Outside the door. That is unnecessary. Nothing about tonight suggests that. Grace looked toward the harbor. You should have believed me about the medication. Adrian removed his blood-stained shirt. Scars covered his chest and shoulder. The wound beneath his ribs had opened again. Grace reached for the medical kit. He watched her approach. I thought you were protecting yourself by making my nightmares important. Her hand stopped. You thought I wanted you dependent on me. Yes. The honesty hurt more than a lie. Grace began cleaning the wound. Adrian did not move. You were right, he said. About the medication. About me trusting history more than evidence. Grace pressed gauze against his skin. He inhaled sharply. Do not mistake pain for punishment. I would know the difference. She looked up. Their faces were close. Too close. The cold man feared across Boston stood shirtless before her. Allowing her hands against the scars, no doctor had been permitted to touch without armed supervision. His gaze dropped toward her lips. Grace felt his fingers settle lightly against her waist. He did not pull her closer. He only held her as though confirming she was real. Grace whispered his name. A guard entered. We found Vale. Adrian released her immediately. We're dead. Inside the tunnel. Someone reached him before we could move him. Grace looked toward the dark windows. The person behind the attack had lost a doctor, but had also silenced the only witness. Adrian put on the clean shirt. Search every account connected to Vale. Find every call. Find every patient. I want the final year of his life placed on this table before sunrise. The guard left. Adrian turned toward Grace. You should sleep. So should you. I will not. That is how they win. His expression became cold. I do not need sleep. Grace folded her arms. You nearly stabbed a pillow because you believed it was a man. He stepped closer. You enjoy speaking to me as if I am not dangerous. No, I speak to you that way because you already know you are dangerous. And you remain. For tonight. His eyes darkened. Grace went upstairs before he could answer. She woke to gunfire. Adrian entered the bedroom and pulled her from the bed as bullets struck the reinforced windows. The safe house has been compromised. How only 6 people knew the location. Then one of your 6 people lied. They ran down the stairs. A guard opened the dock door. Fog covered the harbor. Engines roared beyond it. Adrian pushed Grace into the waiting boat and climbed behind her. 2 guards released the lines, while another fired toward shadows moving across the water. Adrian took the controls. Grace crouched beneath the windshield as the boat surged into the harbor. A second vessel appeared behind them. Gunfire cut through the fog. Adrian forced Grace lower. Stay down. You cannot see through the fog. I know this harbor. The attacking vessel moved closer. A bullet struck the control panel. The engine lost power. Adrian swore and reached for another weapon. Grace looked toward the navigation screen. A maintenance channel appeared on the map ahead. Turn left. It is too narrow. The other boat is wider. Adrian looked at her. Grace pointed toward the channel. Trust evidence. He turned. Their boat entered the narrow passage between 2 old loading platforms. Metal scraped against the side. The attacking vessel attempted to follow and struck a submerged barrier. The impact threw armed men into the water. Adrian accelerated toward the opposite shore. Grace looked back. A figure stood aboard the damaged vessel, wearing a long white coat. Vivienne. Lightning briefly illuminated her face through the fog. Then the distance swallowed her. Adrian saw her too. He said nothing until they reached an underground dock controlled by his family. Grace stepped onto the concrete. You knew. Adrian followed her. I suspected. You kept her inside the estate after she attacked me. I needed to know who she was working with. You used me as bait. No. You allowed her to believe I knew something. His silence answered. Grace stepped away from him. Adrian reached for her arm but stopped himself. I had guards around you. A bullet entered your bedroom. And I covered you. That does not make the bullet acceptable. Anger moved through his face. You think I do not understand that I think you understand danger better than trust. The words struck him. Grace turned away. His voice followed her. The engagement was never about love. She stopped. Adrian stood beneath the harsh lights of the dock. Water ran from his black shirt. His weapon remained in one hand, but the other hung empty at his side. The Bellucci alliance protected my ports. It prevented a war that would kill people who never chose this life. And now I believe Vivienne helped create the war she promised to prevent. Grace looked at him. Why intensify your nightmares? To make me appear unstable. After the marriage, Enzo could question my judgment and place Bellucci men inside every part of my organization. And me, Adrian, held her gaze. You made the plan fail. Because I calmed you. Because you made me remember. Grace thought of the words Adrian repeated during the nightmare. Hold him until the violet seal is broken. She remembered something else. The night before the engagement rehearsal, she had cleaned the private dining room. A box of invitations had been left open. One envelope had been sealed with darker wax than the others. Inside had been a seating chart with the names of Romano captains placed beside Bellucci representatives. It had looked harmless. Grace now understood that it was a map of loyalties. She told Adrian. His expression sharpened. Where is the box? In the estate office. The estate is occupied by people we cannot trust. Then send someone they will not notice. Who? A housekeeper. Grace returned to the Romano estate before sunset. She wore a plain gray uniform, borrowed from a hotel owned by Adrian. Her hair was hidden beneath a scarf. A laundry van carried her through the service gate, while Romano guards created a disturbance near the front entrance. Adrian hated the plan. That was one reason Grace insisted on it. She entered through the kitchen with two women loyal to the estate manager. Bellucci guards occupied the main halls, but they ignored cleaning staff. Grace moved through the service corridors she knew better than any armed man. She reached the ballroom office. The box of invitations was gone. Vivienne stood behind her. You always did forget to knock. Grace turned. Vivienne wore a black dress and held a small gun beside her thigh. Grace looked toward the closed door. Where is Adrian? Somewhere close enough to hear if I scream. Then you should be careful. Vivienne smiled. He told everyone you saved him. Do you know what he says in his sleep? Grace remained silent. Your name. Jealousy sharpened every word, even before he knew you. Even when I was beside him. He woke asking whether Grace was safe. That is why you entered the bedroom that night. I entered because my future husband had replaced me with a servant. He never asked you to sit beside him. Vivienne raised the gun. He did not need to ask. Grace recognized the violet perfume. The same scent Adrian remembered from the garage. You were there during the assassination. The smile of Vivienne disappeared. Grace continued. You watched the car burn. Vivienne moved closer. I watched a plan fail. Why did you leave him alive? He was supposed to survive. Wounded. Frightened. Dependent on medication. My father needed a husband. Not a corpse. And the men who died, they served Adrian. That was their choice. Grace felt disgust overpower fear. "Where is the invitation box?" Vivienne laughed. "You came back for paper, I came back for proof." "No. You came back because you believe he will choose you." Grace looked directly at her. "He already chose to believe me." Vivienne struck her with the gun. Grace fell against the desk. The office door opened. Adrian stood in the corridor. 3 Romano guards surrounded him. Vivienne pressed the gun against the head of Grace. "Do not move." Adrian looked at the blood near the temple of Grace. The calmness left his face. "Release her." Vivienne pulled Grace closer. "You cannot kill me without starting a war." Adrian stepped into the room. "I will build a monument from the ashes." Grace saw his hand moving toward the weapon beneath his jacket. Vivienne saw it too. She fired. Adrian crossed the distance before the sound ended. He knocked the gun aside and forced Vivienne against the wall. Guards dragged her away as Grace sank to the floor. Adrian knelt beside her. His hands hovered near her face. Afraid to touch the injury. "Look at me." Grace opened her eyes. "I am looking." He released a breath. Behind the desk, one of the guards found the invitation box. Beneath the seating charts were bank records, payment codes, and photographs of Dr. Vale entering Bellucci property. The evidence confirmed everything. Yet one question remained. How had the attackers located the safe house? Adrian brought Grace to another secured residence inside the city. He promised there were no hidden locations known only to trusted men. Grace discovered the lie before midnight. She opened what appeared to be a library door and found a surveillance room. Photographs covered one wall. Grace leaving her apartment. Grace buying coffee. Grace waiting for a bus. Grace speaking with the estate manager. Grace visiting the grave of her father. There were photographs from weeks before the engagement dinner. Some had been taken before the first night she sat beside the bed of Adrian. She heard him enter behind her. Grace turned slowly. How long Adrian looked at the photographs? Since the library. Before the nightmares, you pointed a gun at me and then had strangers follow me. I needed to know whether someone sent you. And after you knew I was only a housekeeper, his silence made her chest ache. Grace looked at the most recent photograph. It showed her walking through the snow after Vivienne dismissed her. You followed me even when your men were searching for me. I needed eyes on every part of your life. You needed control. I needed you alive. You did not ask what I needed. His voice became rough. If I asked, you would have refused. Exactly. Adrian stepped closer. The people attacking me know your name. They know where you live. They know you can stop the nightmares. I will not allow them to reach you. You do not get to protect me by taking away every choice. I am not capable of watching you die. The confession filled the room. Grace looked at him. Adrian had not said he cared for her. He had said something darker, something more honest. He was afraid. Grace touched one of the photographs. This is not love. I did not call it love. What do you call it? His eyes held hers. The only thing I cannot control. Grace felt tears threaten. She refused to let them fall. You do not trust me. You investigate me. You follow me. You place guards outside my home. Then you reach for me every night as though I am the only safe thing in your world. You are. That does not make me yours. Adrian stopped. Grace walked past him. He caught her hand. The contact was gentle, but the desperation beneath it was not. Do not leave. Release me. His fingers opened immediately. Grace looked back. Adrian stood among hundreds of photographs that proved how deeply his fascination had become obsession. He could have ordered her to remain. He could have locked every door. Instead, he moved away from the exit. Grace left. For the next 2 days, Adrian did not sleep. He also did not send anyone to bring her back. One guard watched the apartment building from across the street. exactly as Grace expected. The man never approached. Grace returned to her old life. She found temporary work at a hotel near the harbor. She cleaned rooms, changed sheets, and tried not to think about the silence beside the bed of Adrian. The public scandal began on the third morning. A video appeared online showing Grace leaving the private bedroom floor of the Romano estate. Another image showed Adrian wrapping his coat around her in the snow. Anonymous sources claimed Grace had manipulated a wounded man, destroyed a political engagement, and received money in exchange for intimacy. Reporters appeared outside the hotel. The manager dismissed Grace before lunch. She walked through the lobby as strangers raised phones toward her face. A reporter shouted, "Did you sleep with Adrian Romano?" Grace kept walking. "Did he leave Vivienne Bellucci because of you?" The entrance doors opened. Adrian stood outside. Black vehicles filled the street. Armed guards formed a path through the crowd. He wore a dark suit and no overcoat despite the cold. Exhaustion shadowed his face. Grace stopped inside the doorway. Adrian looked at the reporters. "Grace Miller never had a romantic relationship with me while she worked inside my home." Cameras flashed. He continued, "She protected me after an assassination attempt. She refused money. She refused favors. She refused me when I behaved as if protection gave me ownership over her life." Grace stared at him. A reporter called out, "Is the engagement over?" "Yes." "Did Grace cause it?" "No, sir." "Betrayal caused it." "Are you in love with her?" The street became silent. Adrian looked at Grace. She expected him to make another claim. Instead, he said, "That is a question Grace has the right to answer before the public does." He stepped away from the entrance. He had come to defend her. He did not ask her to follow. For the first time, Adrian protected her without trying to possess the result. Grace took one step toward him. A delivery truck exploded across the street. The force shattered the hotel windows. Adrian ran toward Grace as the crowd screamed. He covered her before the glass reached them. Guards surrounded the entrance. Smoke filled the street. Through the confusion, a man wearing a hotel uniform seized Grace from behind. A cloth covered her mouth. The world disappeared. Grace woke inside an abandoned church. Rain struck the broken stained glass windows. Candles burned along the altar, even though half of the roof had collapsed. Her wrists were tied to a wooden chair. Vivienne stood near the altar, wearing a white coat. Enzo Bellucci sat in the front pew. Grace tested the rope. Enzo noticed, "Do not waste your strength." "Where is Adrian coming?" Vivienne looked toward the church doors. "He always comes when you are afraid." Grace studied the room. 4 armed men stood near the walls. Another guarded the entrance. A camera rested on a tripod facing her. Enzo approached. "You are going to record a statement." "What statement?" "You will say Adrian attacked you. You will describe his nightmares, his weapons, and his violent behavior. You will explain that he has become unstable. Nobody will believe me after the hotel. They will when they see what he does to recover you." Grace understood. The church was a trap designed to force Adrian into a public massacre. Vivienne adjusted the camera. "My father will release the recording after Adrian arrives. The city will see a broken man murdering people inside a church for his housekeeper." Grace looked at her. This was never about peace. It was about inheritance. Enzo said, "Adrian controls an empire larger than any family should possess. Marriage would have given us access. His death would have created chaos. His instability gives us both." Grace looked toward the candles. "Why keep the nightmares secret?" "Because powerful men can survive bullets." Enzo replied, "They cannot survive pity." Vivienne crouched in front of Grace. "He was supposed to become dependent on me. I was supposed to be the woman who guided him through the darkness. Then you arrived with your soft voice and your ordinary blue dress." Grace saw hatred beneath the polished beauty. You were never angry because I entered his room. You were angry because he called my name. Vivienne slapped her. Grace turned back slowly. Did that make you feel powerful the first time Vivienne struck her again? Grace smiled through the pain. It did not make him love you. Vivienne reached for the gun at her waist. Enzo caught her wrist. Not yet. Thunder shook the church. The lights from black vehicles appeared through the broken windows. Adrian had arrived. The front doors opened. He entered alone. Rain covered his black coat. Blood marked one side of his face from the hotel explosion. He carried no visible weapon. Grace felt both relief and terror. Enzo stepped into the center aisle. You came quickly. Adrian looked only at Grace. Are you hurt? Grace shook her head. Vivienne pressed a gun against her neck. She is now. Adrian stopped. Enzo lifted a remote control. Cameras are recording every corner. Your men enter. And the images reach every news station in Boston. Adrian looked toward the armed men. What do you want? Your ports. Your accounts. Your captains. You will sign control to Vivienne and announce that the transfer is temporary while you recover. Adrian smiled without warmth. You built an entire war because your daughter could not keep a man asleep. Vivienne pushed the gun harder against Grace. Adrian looked at her. The smile vanished. Release Grace and I will sign. Grace stared at him. No. Adrian did not look away from Vivienne. Enzo placed documents on the altar. Adrian walked forward. Grace pulled against the rope. Do not do this. His eyes found hers. You once told me that everyone answers to someone. He reached the altar. I answer to you. The words broke through every defense Grace had built. Enzo handed him a pen. Adrian began signing. The first bell rang above the church. Every armed man looked upward. The second bell was followed by darkness. The candles went out. Grace heard glass shatter. Gunfire erupted from the balcony. Adrian overturned the altar and moved toward her through the darkness. Vivienne fired blindly. A bullet struck the chair. Grace threw herself sideways as Adrian reached her. He covered her body. Romano guards entered through hidden doors beneath the choir loft. They had reached the church through old service tunnels identified on city records. The cameras continued recording. They recorded Bellucci men firing first. They recorded Enzo ordering the death of Adrian. They recorded Vivienne aiming at Grace. Adrian cut the rope from the wrists of Grace. Stay behind me. Enzo emerged beside the altar with a gun. Grace saw him first. Adrian. The shot echoed. Adrian turned and placed himself between Grace and the bullet. His body jerked. He fired once. Enzo fell beside the documents he had forced Adrian to sign. Adrian sank to one knee. Grace caught him. Blood spread across his side. Vivienne stood behind them with the gun raised. Grace reached for a broken piece of wood and struck the hand of Vivienne. The weapon fell across the floor. Vivienne attacked her. Both women crashed against the front pew. Grace fought with every part of herself that had been told to remain quiet, to remain grateful, remain invisible. Vivienne reached for the gun again. Grace placed her foot over it. Vivienne looked up. Grace lifted the weapon. For 1 second, she wanted to pull the trigger. Adrian spoke behind her. Do not let her decide who you become. Grace looked at him. He was losing blood, but his attention remained on her. She lowered the gun. Romano guards seized Vivienne. She screamed as they dragged her through the church. Adrian collapsed. Grace dropped beside him. Stay with me. His eyes struggled to remain open. Tell me what color your dress is. Grace looked down at the gray hotel uniform she still wore beneath a borrowed coat. Gray. The carpet. There is no carpet. The windows, broken. The blood. Too much. Adrian almost smiled. You are here. I am here. His fingers found hers. The nightmare is over. Grace whispered. He closed his eyes. Adrian survived the bullet. He woke 2 days later inside a private hospital room, guarded by men on every floor. Grace sat near the window. She had not slept. When his eyes opened, he immediately searched for her. Grace moved beside the bed. "You are safe." He looked toward their joined hands. "Did you stay because I asked? You were unconscious." "That has never stopped me from asking." Grace felt tears gather. Adrian studied her face. "Vivienne Alive. Her father is dead. The church recordings expose the Bellucci plan. Every captain who supported them has abandoned the family. The port's still yours." He closed his eyes briefly. "I signed everything. The documents were destroyed during the shooting." Adrian looked at her again. "You saved my empire. I saved you." His expression changed. Grace understood that nobody had ever said those words to him without wanting something in return. He lifted her hand toward his mouth but stopped before kissing it. Grace remembered every time he had almost touched her. Every time power had become restraint. "I cannot be the reason you sleep," she said. Pain entered his eyes. Grace continued, "I cannot be your medication. I cannot spend my life waiting beside a bed because you refuse to heal when I am not there." He released her hand. "You are leaving." "I did not say that." Hope appeared so quickly that it made him look younger. Grace sat closer. "You need treatment from someone who cannot be threatened, bribed, or chosen by your family. You need to learn how to wake without reaching for a weapon. You need to learn that fear does not make you weak." Adrian looked toward the window. "Men like me do not discuss fear with strangers. Then discuss it with someone who understands trauma. And you, I will decide what I am to you after you stop treating me like the only wall holding your world together." Silence filled the room. Adrian had built an empire by refusing every demand he did not create himself. Grace waited. Finally, he nodded. "I will do it. Because I asked. Because I want a life where you can leave the room without taking the air with you." Grace touched his face. Adrian closed his eyes against her palm. 3 months passed. The Romano estate changed slowly. The Western guest house was emptied. Every employee received new contracts protecting them from abuse. Security cameras remained outside private homes unless written permission was given. Adrian began meeting a trauma specialist twice each week. The nightmares did not disappear. They lost their power. Some nights he woke with his heart racing and his hands searching for a weapon that was no longer beneath the pillow. He learned to name the objects in the room. He learned to breathe. He learned that surviving the attack did not require reliving it forever. Grace did not return as a housekeeper. She accepted a position managing a new foundation funded by the Romano family. The foundation supported workers injured in violent crimes and families forced to rebuild after loss. She rented a brighter apartment. Adrian never placed guards outside without asking. He still sent a car when the weather became dangerous. Grace sometimes refused it. He learned to survive that too. Their first real kiss happened in the estate library. Grace had come to review plans for the foundation office. Adrian stood beside the fireplace where he had once pointed a gun at her. "You cleaned this room the first time we met," he said. "You threatened me the first time we met. I was injured. You were rude." He moved closer. "You told me to clean my own blood from the carpet. It was a good carpet." His hand settled near her waist but did not touch. "May I?" Grace smiled. "You are learning." She placed his hand against her. Adrian kissed her slowly. There was no desperation in it. No nightmare. No command. Only restraint finally giving way to choice. Months later, snow fell over Boston again. The Romano estate glowed beneath thousands of lights. But there were no wealthy guests in the ballroom and no political families waiting for an announcement. Grace stood on the balcony, wearing a deep blue dress that followed the soft curves of her body. Her auburn hair moved in the winter wind. Adrian stepped outside wearing a black suit. No guards followed him. Grace looked toward the dark gardens. "You should be sleeping." "I was." No nightmares. 1. She turned toward him. Adrian continued. I woke. I saw the curtains. I counted my breaths. I remembered where I was. Grace felt pride warm her chest. Then why are you awake? Because I wanted to see you. He removed a small box from his pocket. Grace stared at it. Adrian did not kneel immediately. He looked almost uncomfortable, which was more frightening to him than any weapon. The first night you sat beside my bed, I thought needing another person was the same as surrendering power. Grace listened. Then I believed protecting you gave me the right to control you. You taught me that devotion without trust becomes another kind of prison. He opened the box. A diamond rested inside, surrounded by small blue stones, the color of the dress Grace had worn when they met. I do not want you beside me because I cannot sleep alone. I want to wake beside you because you chose to stay. Adrian lowered himself to one knee. Grace Miller, will you marry me? Snow settled across his dark hair. The most dangerous man in Boston waited without issuing an order. Grace touched his face. Yes. Adrian closed his eyes for one brief second. Relief moved through him so deeply that Grace understood he had feared losing her even then. He placed the ring on her finger and rose. Grace wrapped her arms around his neck. When he kissed her, fireworks appeared above the harbor. She pulled back in surprise. You planned fireworks? Adrian looked almost offended. I was confident. You were terrified. I was prepared for several outcomes. How many? Only one mattered. He lifted her into his arms. Grace laughed as he carried her through the balcony doors. The guards inside the corridor immediately looked away, but several servants smiled. Adrian stopped beneath the chandelier. Once, Grace had entered this house through a service door and been ordered to remain invisible. Now the entire estate waited for the choice she had made freely. She looked at the man holding her. Do you still have nightmares? Sometimes. What do you see when you wake? Adrian looked into her eyes. Home. He carried her upstairs as snow covered the road where she had once walked away alone. The bedroom door closed softly behind them. There was no blanket on the carpet. There was no chair beside the window. There was only a man who had finally learned that love was not weakness, and a woman who had never asked him to become harmless. She had only asked him to become honest. For the first time since the assassination attempt, Adrian slept through the night. Grace slept beside him because she wanted to. When morning light entered the room, Adrian opened his eyes without fear. His hand reached across the bed. Grace was there. Not as his housekeeper, not as his cure, not as something he owned. She was there as the only woman powerful enough to walk away from a mafia boss, and the only woman he had loved enough to let return by choice.